There's been some weather. Like there's been a lot going on.
Some very intense weather.
And like you had the opportunity. Was it last week? Like you went and did some disaster relief. You got to use a chainsaw and whatever else you were.
Well, sadly, I didn't get to use a chainsaw, but that was my hope. But yeah, I was down sort of in southeast Georgia, doing some work down there in a place called Vidalia, which probably most people haven't heard of, and it doesn't really get any sort of press that I can see. But like 2 weeks later, or 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene, and like still there are people without power. There's like tons of power line poles just split in half, and just crews working around the clock down there. So I just did a very, very small like work down there for a day to just do what I could. And it's crazy because it's only like 2.5 hours or so from our house, from where we live, and yet it's like people still without power. Like it's just trees down just everywhere.
Well, I think it's just the nature, and I think it's understandable. Like it's not. I think we all do it, but like just how quickly we move on to like this because like again school was shut down here, and like my house lost power for a day, and like we had very mild though like like we were out walking. Walking my dog like that evening, like but it's you see some of the pictures and stuff going on in like Asheville and other places, and it's like people are still really suffering from this, and it's hard to keep that like, and I think it's impossible, unrealistic to just live like otherwise we just live in a constant state of just like heaviness of like there's always suffering going on, and we just can't carry that all the time. But I think one of the ways we kind of can escape from that is into the world of sort of social media. So kind of one of the interesting stories that I've sort of been tracking based on like the more recent hurricane that went through Florida with Hurricane Milton is the kind of the viral character story that emerged from that tragedy, which is Lieutenant Dan. Which, hey, my name is Dan. I feel like that would be a good nickname. I could go by Lieutenant Dan. The real name, though, is Joe Malinsky, who is he's 54 years old. He's an amputee, and he just sort of became this like instant overnight viral sensation. Like, sort of this. It seemed like it promised sort of in the midst of suffering and tragedy. Here's this sort of inspirational. Because if you haven't followed sort of some of the stories and stuff, like he's this guy that has like a small like sailing boat. And I mean, like, he's not leaving. Like, he's in like the path of the hurricane. Yeah. And like, he's gonna ride that thing out. Like, he's gonna, he's gonna stay in his boat. Make sure that knot is tied pretty tight, and he's gonna kind of wait it out. And sort of his story. I forget exactly how he first emerged onto the scene, whether he was interviewed by a different TikToker or how that worked. But quickly became sort of this like man versus nature. Almost like a Hollywood story waiting to happen of sort of this guy, and just sort of all this attention got brought onto him of like people wanted to know like there's like people tracking his every hourly updates on how Lieutenant Dan is surviving through the storm, and some of the interviews too, especially if you're a Christian, kind of it was hitting the sweet spot. Like he was saying all the right things. So some quotes that he said in some of these videos said, I put my faith in God. I don't put my faith in man. God told me to come out here and get a boat. I came out here and got a boat. Everything he's been telling me the last few days, I'm doing the right thing. He's got my back. I'm in good shape. I ain't sweating it. And then in a different interview, he said, when you're a warrior, a soldier, you do what you're told. And God told me to come here and get a boat. I came here and got a boat. I believe in a lot of the TikTok spiritual leaders that I listen to, and I hear messages that are sent from God, that he's got his finger on the eye. He's got his finger on the eye of the storm, so I don't have to about it.
Amen.
That'll preach. You could shout that from the mountaintop. And like, as tends to happen, everyone else sort of wants in on some of the spotlight, and like so, a lot of other like TikTokers, social media stars, kind of like jumped in to insert themselves into this into the story. So like there was a different TikToker, Tampa Terrence is the name he uses, started like a GoFundMe support. It says GoFundMe to support Lieutenant Dan's seafaring dreams, which as of I checked yesterday had raised like over $46,500 of people donating their money to help this guy get a new boat or support his.
Yeah, I would say saying they will donate their money to support Lieutenant Dan. will that happen? I just
yeah, well, yeah.
I have skepticism when like these good-natured folk on the internet say, "Hey, we're going to raise money for this." It's like, well,
yeah, that's how I want.
I hope that's where it goes, but we'll see.
Because then another TikToker, Aiden Ross, offered on a live stream with Lieutenant Dan like $100,000 to buy his new boat, and like a streaming deal, which it seems like I've seen conflicting amounts, but like could be as high as like $1 million, like this massive streaming thing. Like he became like this hero, the hero we all needed in the face of the storm. Yeah. What's interesting to me is like what happened after that, like because like in many ways that's the sort of this like feel good story, and we all want that, and there's people are suffering, so this is sort of this light, but sort of like what's transpired since then I think reveals a lot just about, I kind of call it like our TikTok culture, but like sort of this social media reality TV-esque culture that we live in, because like as his fame rose, like people started to see like, well, who is this guy? Beyond the man on a boat, who is this? And it seems like this guy, Lieutenant Dan, has a past, because you might have even seen it if you're on social media, like there's like collages of like all of his mugshots.
He's done some time.
He's been behind bars, as recently as he spent like 6 months, I think earlier this year or the end of last year, for like punching a police officer in the head and like fighting back against a police officer. He was arrested last year for allegations that like he was trying to light a woman on fire. Like he was like dousing her with gasoline and like I think holding like a cigarette, and he was like threatening to like light her on fire. Like, seems like he's not necessarily
not the hero that we were led to believe.
Yeah, he's not sort of the squeaky clean hero against the forces of nature. And kind of what really brought this home, and then we can get into it, is like his daughter, I think yesterday, as of recording this podcast, released her own like TikTok video. I mean, like very emotional, and just sort of like speaking about the I guess like the unintended consequences of what so many people thought were this good thing to support this guy. And there's sort of a clip from that. She says, "You're all going to put him in the grave early for making him famous and giving him this money. You all don't even know what the bleep you're doing. Nobody actually cares for him. You're all just using him to make him famous, make yourself famous, but nobody bleeping cares." Which I mean is a powerful thing coming from his daughter.
Yeah.
But what do you think about this? Because this is I feel like this is like a case study of like, in 2 acts or whatever of, I think some of the positive, but like a lot of the negative of sort of this social media reality TV bubble that we can live in.
Yeah. I mean, I think it just reveals how like hungry people are to just be famous and be stars no matter what. Because I think, and we've said this before, but I think, you ask kids today, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And a lot of them will say like TikTok stars or like a YouTube influencer or whatever. Like that has become like such a high watermark for so many people to chase after. And so I think it's just like you see, I think an instance like this, at first, maybe you could think, okay, well, this is like, hey, people just trying to support this crazy guy on a boat in a hurricane, like, which is like, that's crazy enough on its own. And like, I have issues with somebody who wants to do that. But it quickly just shows like they're not really in it for like this guy's well-being. And it's like, it's really just about views. It's kind of, what it cynically all comes down to is like views and clicks. And it's interesting because it's not just like, media companies doing this. There's like individuals now, because of things like social media, that you can go and find sort of the next viral thing and sort of attach your name to it and try and, what is it, like clout chasing or whatever they call it, where you're just, you're grifting essentially on whatever this thing that's going off on social media to try and like, elevate your own channel and status and success.
Yeah, and I think it's also too like there's like an element of just like reducing things to a spectacle. Like,
yeah,
because I think in some ways maybe it's a squiggly rather than a straight line, but like I think is related to like the first thing about the Matt Wall. Like, is this sort of draw to almost like make this parallel world, like this sort of we live over. There's a lot of bad stuff going on. Like we're gonna kind of make this like this, parallel track, this universe we can kind of live into, like for the hurricane, like, the horrible tragedy, like lives are lost, like people's, like you
tons
saying,
and
like,
tons of damage. Yeah.
Like they're, for a lot of people that were in the path of this, like that's like going to forever change their life, or like, at least they're going to be struggling against that, for a long time. And that's difficult. Like that's uncomfortable. That if we want to like help, like, like you going and helping, like it demands more of us. But I think what this shows, this is like our tendency, like the thing that keeps coming to mind for me is the Hunger Games. Like,
yeah,
in many ways, our culture has, like, that movie has been proved, like, vindicated, like, valid, like, very prophetic of, like, you sort of have suffering, you have these, real world stuff, and like our sort of escapist way to deal with that is just to turn it into like a game show, like to turn it into just a spectacle that, now we're just sort of, we found our hero, even we don't care that he's not, that he's trying to light women on fire. Like he sort of represents, and we're giving tons of money to this guy having a boat, not the people that have lost their homes. Like, there's,
right.
This guy sort of becomes this like fun, like I think a lot of the culture is like almost following it like it's the Dallas Cowboys. Like, you sort of want your update, and he's your guy, he's your champion, and he's, is he winning? Are we going to hang in there? And you grab your popcorn and check for the next Lieutenant Dan update on the news. And like, it's just sort of become this way to like, to escape, block out the actual suffering and seriousness, and just become this sort of empty, like, very like cynical sort of escapist reality of just, like a reality TV show of like, we've turned it's just a big spectacle.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, it's just, it turns these really huge tragedies into just a spectacle, and it removes you from the hurt and the devastation, because it's like, oh well, it's a fun thing of Lieutenant Dan in the storm. It's like, no, it's not not millions of people losing power and their house flooding again after a second hurricane comes through. Like, that's unfortunate, but tell me more about Lieutenant Dan and his boat and his battle against the elements. Like, and so it's not wrong to like escape from time to time, but it's really bizarre, and I do think it is very much like a Hunger Games type of thing in real life, because it's like this isn't just like this is a real hurricane, and like real damage is being done, and like somehow we're finding it fun to like follow this guy.
Yeah, it's become entertainment,
right?
Which like you can't imagine that in a world without like social media, like the Chicago fire, or some of these tragedies, like the plague, people in the next city being like, well, but how is Jeffrey Smith hanging in there from his
like our people are making bets, like, hey,
people are literally placing bets on if you would survive or not, like I mean, it's the Hunger Games, like it's
I mean, that's
sort of this like, okay, what's this use, because and I think like her video, the daughter's video nails it, that like maybe not nobody, but like the vast majority of people sort of engaging in this don't care about this guy.
No,
like they don't. If he did die, they'd be sad and they'd move on the next minute. Like, it's just, he's just sort of this like vessel, this vehicle for us to sort of get a sort of a cheap entertainment, divert us for a little bit on social media before we just go on with our life. Like, or the people trying to support him, like a lot of them are just like, hey, this guy is the main character right now, and I got to at least be a sidekick, and like I need to get on some of the attention. Like, look how good I am. I'm going to support this guy and give my money and film myself doing it. And like,
I think the more you think about it, it's just like super dark.
Yeah,
like the very much the dark side of social media.
And like you said, I don't think there's anything wrong like with finding inspirational stories that uplift us in the midst of. Like even like the first hurricane, like I know there's some viral clips of like a news reporter that like stops his report to go like literally save someone's life that's drowning. And like that was such like like that's cool. Like that's people. Sometimes we think people are just terrible these days, but like they're not. Like people can do good things. And like, it's like it's not that it's wrong to find those inspirational human drama. Like,
and I think I was gonna say you almost need those, and they're everywhere. Like especially coming out of like Western North Carolina, like there's just tons of stories of people who are just doing crazy things to save their neighbors.
Yeah, like that's good. The danger is just sort of the fine line of like where you cross over from just sort of like actively caring about people to sort of dehumanizing people to just sort of serve this like this entertainment spectacle for the day that we can sort of follow and make memes and like kind of do this thing. So I don't know, that stood out to me because I feel like in so many ways that reflects a lot of like the things that aren't healthy about sort of our social media culture.